claiming to have stabbed her in a play fight will be sentenced next month. 50-year-old Simon Vickers killed Scarlett Vickers at their home in County Durham last July. And WH Smith is in talks to sell its 500 high street stores. It wants to separate them from its more profitable travel stores at airports and railway stations. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed at 1 point at 85.03. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.18. LBC weather, cloudy skies across much of the UK tonight. Outbreaks of rain and showers and a low of 1. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. Welcome to Monday's Cross Question. On our panel, sitting to my left, is Onwurah, who is Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne Central and West. I've never heard of a constituency having Central and West in its name before.
Well,
didn't they make up their minds?
It's the best constituency in the country.
Of course
That's
it is.
all you need to remember.
She's also the chair of the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee. Next to her is the remarkably svelte Sir Alec Shelbrooke, a sentence he never thought he'd hear me say. Conservative MP for Wetherby and Easingwold, who's also the Vice President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Next to me, on my right, Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, and next to her is Nels Abbey, social commentator, who's the author of the book Think Like a White Man. It does say here satirical book. I think you get a bit of flack over that, don't you, when people don't realise it's actually satirical.
Yeah, they think I'm dead straight serious. Yeah.
Well, we might talk about that a little bit later. Lots to talk about tonight, so do get dialing 0345 6060 973. But then again, who dials nowadays? Press the buttons. And you can watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's start off with a text question from Janine in Bishop Stortford. What are the most important lessons from the Holocaust for our modern age? Alec.
So, the Holocaust is something that has to always be treated with respect. And I have, over the years, most of my parliamentary team, I have gone to Auschwitz-Birkenau with the Holocaust Educational Trust. And I thought it was important for people who wanted to work and be involved in politics to understand where unmitigated power against a background of hatred and spin effectively will lead to. And I think in the modern era, I think you see exactly the same situation now playing out with Putin. Putin's essay of July 2021 was very similar to Mein Kampf. He picks on the Crimean Tatars, and there's some evidence that there's been a complete almost genocide of those Tatars in Crimea. Of course, we can't get in there to verify that. He talks about wanting to expand the Russian Empire, uniting the traditional, historic Russian-speaking people. So I feel that one of the reasons it is so important to recognise why 6 million people were murdered by the Third Reich is because history can repeat itself. Indeed, I would argue that to some extent it is being repeated by Putin and his aims, and that we must be aware of that because we must make sure we stand up to it with full force. And I think that the worst thing any society can do is to let people forget about some of the most heinous crimes in what is effectively the modern age.
I think one of the other things which we shouldn't forget, and I'm not diminishing the fact that 6 million Jews were killed, but there were other people that were killed as well, who on this day don't often get a mention. Gypsies, homosexuals, disabled people.
Absolutely.
What lessons do you draw from the Holocaust for our modern age?
Well, you mentioned gypsies and disabled people and those who weren't Jews who died in the Holocaust. And on Saturday, I joined the Roma community of Newcastle in commemorating the 200 to 500,000 Roma and Sinti peoples who died, who were murdered in the Holocaust in concentration camps. And what was for me was very particularly moving was seeing, it's a relatively new community in Newcastle. It's a very vibrant community, but the respect that they had for their history and the desire for, that's often called the forgotten Holocaust, the murder of hundreds of thousands of Roma people, the desire that they have for that to be recognised, and also to the point of what the lessons are today. It did not start with the concentration camps and the industrialized murder. It started with the dehumanization of people, of making people not like us. And that's something that the Roma are experiencing. It's something that we've seen with the rise in anti-Semitism. So again, Jewish people are experiencing that. We see the rise of Islamophobia, and we also see it, with how people are treated and referred to on social media. So for me, I grew up knowing about the Holocaust, knowing I could have cited you the figures of 6 million died as a teenager even. But what really made a difference to my understanding of it was reading Primo Levi's If This Be a Man. And it's interesting to note that was initially published just after the war ended, and it didn't get, I think it sold 400 copies or something, and it didn't get a readership. But for me, it's witnesses, hearing from witnesses. And, it's 80 years now since the liberation of Auschwitz, so there are fewer and fewer witnesses. So it's keeping the witnesses' testimonies and memories and their words alive and known, because that is how we fight dehumanization. Because when you listen to somebody, when you hear their thoughts, they're human.
Nels.
For me, the first thing I take away from it is the mantra of never again. Never, ever again.
But it has happened since, hasn't it?
Well, but I take that mantra away from it in terms of my thinking. You're right. Of course, we've had the Rwandan genocide. There's been other issues or so. But exactly. But to me, the thing I took away from it, the defiance and the steadfastness in face of absolute dehumanization and industrialized murder, and then the ability, watching, say, for example, the Jewish people, the founding of the State of Israel, so on and so forth, so watching them bounce back from the absolute, unmitigated, unbelievable tragedy. Actually, it's not even a tragedy, atrocity of unbelievable magnitude or so, is something that I've always admired and something I'll admire, but until the day I die. But the concept of never again is something I take into all of my thinking. So the absolute rejection of ethno-supremacism, of any form or fashion, is something that I really take away. I'll give you one example of it. And she just mentioned dehumanization. It dawned on me this morning as I was reading stuff about Colombia or so, for example, Trump deporting people to Colombia and that getting some sort of trade war with them, etc. It dawned on me that I've never seen a positive portrayal of Colombian people in my life. Ever. So it's part of that actual dehumanization once again too. I remember there's a great documentary called Real Bad Arabs where it's talking about how Arabic people were dehumanized over successive periods of time or so in movies or so, where they're consistently the bad person. And then you then see how that just leads to actual policy and the ability for people to actually wage things upon them too. So from never forget to the absolute, how we think and talk and speak about people, how we treat people who are desperate, who are in desperate positions, particularly refugees. The person who shows up somewhere, say for example on the boat into Britain, and they're looking for refuge, they're looking for security, they're looking for some degree of sustenance, some degree of help. How we treat those people, the nothings of society, the absolute dehumanized people of society, how we actually treat them and how we respond to those sorts of situations is what I take away from the story of the Holocaust or so, and of course the triumph of the comeback or so. Because again, if there's a great thing that came out, well, there's nothing great that came out of the story or so, but the ability to see people actually pick themselves back up, get back on their feet, and take things forward from there is something that I completely admire. But at the root of all of it, also for myself as a black person living on this planet, so is historically aware, the concept and the defiance of never again is something that inspires me and will always do so.
Natasha.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nels, on language. I think, my main takeaway is that we, as, journalists and working in the media, should be really, really careful with what we say and be really, really careful with not pushing that boundary too far. And, as journalists, we can be guilty of maybe sometimes trying to push people into saying that.
Isn't it more for politicians to be careful?
But I think both, because I think sometimes, we can, as the media, want things to be, punchy and exciting and interesting and spiky and sparky and create debate. And of course, that's what obviously happens in the House of Commons day in, day out. And I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. Of course it is. But we should be careful with our language. I think that's my main takeaway. And also just to shine a light, because people don't want to see this, and people didn't want to see this. And some of the coverage that I've been reading today, which I've been really taken with, which is sort of hearing from the people that were trying to tell the story of the Holocaust, but that nobody wanted to listen at the time. And I don't know if you've seen the Lee Miller film that was out a couple of months ago, which was the Lee Miller, the photojournalist that went into Auschwitz, and she was one of the first photojournalists in there, and she couldn't get her photos published because when she came out, nobody wanted to see it. Nobody wanted to see it.
I think that is interesting, because thinking back, I don't remember being aware of the Holocaust until I was about 15, and that was only because there was an American drama series on television, you might remember, called Holocaust. It was very sort of schmaltzy soap opera, but it was horrific as well. Meryl Streep, she was in it, wasn't she?
Yes.
And it was a 6-8-parter. And I remember thinking at the time, why don't I know about this already? Okay, I was only 15, but we didn't learn about it in school. And I wonder whether the coverage of it over the last 30 or 40 years has meant that new generations know a lot more than my generation did, which, I grew up in the sort of aftermath of the Second World War. My primary school, games in the playground were all dominated by the Second World. It sounds ridiculous. But we all pretended to be Spitfires.
Yeah. Well, I happen to know about it because my foster mum was German Jewish. So I happen to be. So I was raised in that sort of in the backdrop of it or so. So we understood it. It was very, very clear to us from very, very early on. So songs like "We'll Meet Again," for example, would make her break down crying.
Yeah.
So it was very, very clear to me from an early age. And the concept or the anti-racism that some people might say I spew or so, or the positions I take or so, are actually permeating from that. If you meet my biological mum today, she doesn't talk about racism at all. But my foster mum was very, very clear to us that, yes, Lisa, you must be firm, you must stand tall, you must actually make sure that when you see other people being put through situations, it's not your job to keep silent. A silent person is a collaborator, so you must actively take a position against the person who's actually being downtrodden at any given time. And I think, again, it's those stories that emerge
powerful
from it.
words from a German Jew. And if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Alec?
I think... how did we learn about it? And I think this is where the responsibility, and it is a heavy responsibility within filmmakers, etc., to tell the story. And I was 17 in 1993, and that's when I think Schindler's List came out. Exceptionally powerful film. When you read about how Steven Spielberg wanted to make that, doing it in black and white. And for me, there's two moments stand out in that film. And one is the girl in the red dress. That was the moment where in this black and white film, you have this young girl, probably about 5 or 6, walking down the streets with her parents, and she's in the red dress. And then later on in the film, you see that red coat, actually, I think it was, in the pile of bodies that they're taking out. That humanised it. The second part of the film is when they all get herded into the showers / gas chambers, and you don't know what's going to happen, and then the water comes on. So I think painting that picture of this was how horrific it is. Now there have been further films made later on, and this level of education I think is important. Now something like Schindler's List is over 30 years old. There have been more modern films made, but I think the medium of film, the media of filmmakers, is a very important way of getting these lessons across. But we must make sure that they don't start to be seen as things which happened a very long time ago. Yeah. That, other war films we've seen from the 18th century or areas like that, we must make sure that there are lessons here today and relevant today, because I still believe that we can describe this as something that happened in the modern era.
Well, I think that would say that the lesson, if you like, or one of the lessons, is always to take the lessons that we learned from the Holocaust, no matter how many decades ago it is, because the memories of the survivors are fading. They're coming to the end of their lives, and we have to be able to take the lessons from it without having their direct testimonies in a way. I think the point about the media, covering it, because as we've said, they've spent, I think from the 40s to the 80s, there was very little coverage of it. There were, I think, as I said, Primo Levi's book was one of the first, and it didn't get the readership it deserved until later. So that thing about making it always human, which is what film and media can do when those who actually lived through it are no longer with us. But the critical, seeing these as people who are like us and not people who far away that it happened to, whom we can't learn anything.
It is that humanisation. The girl in the red coat was the moment where you could humanise what was going on.
Well, and also, do you remember that marvellous moment on That's Live with Esther Ransom? Oh my God! Every time I see that, by the way, the film that Natasha mentioned is called Lee and stars Kate Winslet as the American war photographer Lee Miller. So highly recommend that. Right, we'll move on to some other subjects in just a few moments' time. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
18 minutes past 8. We have Onwurah with us. She chairs the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee. So, Alec Shelbrooke, I can't get used to calling you sir.
Sir.
Why not? Does it still feel weird when people do?
It is such a life-changing moment. It would be daft to say.
How can you be a fellow West Ham supporter and be a sir?
Sir Trevor Brooking.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he started it. Nels Abbey is here, yet to be knighted, but you never know. Social commentator. His book is a satirical book called Think Like a White Man. Do you regret calling it that now?
No, it's a seller. We're in the business of selling books or so. But it might mean I might not get knighted as quickly as Sir Alec over there. But there we go. But who knows what the future holds.
And Dame Natasha Clark is with us, LBC's political editor, who, contrary to popular rumour, is not the daughter of Chi's predecessor, Greg Clark.
That's the last time I tell you anything off air.
I know. So you're right. Right, let's go to a caller. Gurnam is in Manchester. Gurnam, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, all. I'd like to ask the panel, and I was just thinking while I was waiting, perhaps on a scale of 1 to 10 and why, how much do the panel think that social media is driving this, and in particularly the 4 or 5 billionaires that control Snap and Facebook and, that core group is kind of driving all of this traffic around us hating each other and amplifying hate, and there's an agenda here. I don't want to get into that today, but I'm curious as to what the panel think. How much of this is driven, this malaise of between 13 to 27-year-olds? How much of it is driven by social media?
Well, we spent the last hour talking about this new survey that found that just over half of 13 to 27-year-olds surveyed think Britain would be improved by abolishing Parliament and elections and instead installing a strong leader dictator. Nels.
I happen to have experience in this area, and I can tell you categorically, young people, listen to someone with a bit of experience, a bit of age on me here. I've lived under a dictatorship. I've lived under a strongman. I've woken up in the morning and seen my dad bloodied and nearly killed. Just lucky to have lived with his life, to made it through an assassination attempt. I've woken up in the morning and seen my dad's car riddled with bullet holes. I've seen our house also get raided multiple times or so. I can tell you categorically, they call them strong men for a very good reason. It's not cute, it's not beautiful, it's not nice. So democracy is far from perfect. It has many, many flaws. It produces more than its fair share of less than desirable people or so. But in terms of you living under a strong man, trust me, it's not something. It's something that you might sound nice when you're speaking to a survey, to ask the person you asking you survey questions.
Can we ask where that was?
I was in the 90s. I was as chinos or so. I'm of British Nigerian origins, and Nigerian parents have a nuclear button. You don't normally associate nuclear weapons with Nigerian parents, but most African parents and Caribbean parents have a nuclear button. It means that when the kids start misbehaving, suddenly they just disappear from class and they just pop up somewhere in Lagos or somewhere. So I was one of those kids who was misbehaving a little bit. It's after I came out of foster care. Misbehaving a little bit.
Are you sure you're not Kemi Badenoch's twin?
That's such a horrible thing to say about Kemi too. She's far too good looking to be my twin. But no. But the key thing about it is that that happened to me. So then I was about 10 years old. I got sent to Nigerian boarding school, and then I lived under the Abacha regime and the latter days of the Bangla regime in Nigeria. And just speaking out mildly or just having private conversations. So because the problem with strongmen is that they have to actually be strong to maintain it, and sooner or later they'll start turning on you and your family and everything else. So it's not a nice aspiration to have. Democracy has its flaws. We're going through a pretty tough time in Britain right now. The Labour Party hasn't really set the world on fire by any means whatsoever. I'm somebody who...
You've always been a master of understatement, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Keir Starmer's not exciting anybody right now. But I believe that...
exciting me.
But the key thing about it is that you have that they can turn that around. But also, too, the key thing about it is that you get a chance to vote again in 4 years' time. So the strongman idea, Britain isn't that sort of country by any means whatsoever. There are places where the benevolent father figure of the nation or so might be necessary for a period of time or so, but Britain's not one of those places. We're a beacon of democracy for very good reason, and we have to maintain such.
I was trying to think in the last hour of any quasi-dictatorship that I thought that British people would think, well, actually, I wouldn't mind that. The only one that people came up with on the text was Singapore, which I included Lee Kuan Yew in my dictators book, but felt a little bit guilty for doing so because he did actually, I think, care about the good of the people. He won election after election, so I'm not sure he really qualified for that, but he was undoubtedly authoritarian. Natasha, you're the closest we've got to this generation in the studio. Do you understand the results of this survey?
I think the question...
In fact, I think you're closer than Aggie.
Oh, no, actually, I think we're the same age, Aggie and I.
Anyway.
But I think the question was, about a strong leader more than I think what it taught you was about a dictatorship, because I do think that in many democracies around the world, what is still valued in our political system is strong leadership, isn't it? You can see that with the re-election of Donald Trump, and no matter what you think of his politics, he purports to be a strong leader, and that's the sort of leadership that he does. And his supporters will say, look at what we were just talking about with Colombia earlier, and look at that as an example of actually getting things done. And if he does manage to get something done in Ukraine and does manage to have some sort of an impact, people will go, well, that is his strong leadership. Going back to social media, yes, I don't think you can't differentiate what people think about politics from social media these days, especially for generations that are younger than mine. I think that's definitely the case.
Chi?
Well, as a British, Geordie, Irish, Nigerian, I have never lived under a dictatorship.
There aren't many of them to the pound.
That's true, but a few more than you might think, actually. We get around. But I've never lived... I fled... I was born in the Northeast. I fled the war in Nigeria as a toddler as well. And I think that... I grew up in... we had nothing. My mum was disabled, a one-parent family on benefits, but we could see everywhere, what politics had done for us, what what democracy had done for us. I was in a fantastic council house. I had a great school, comprehensive school just down the road. My mum had cancer. She got fantastic care from the NHS, care which hadn't been around when she was born, because she was born before the NHS. So what politics, what democracy, what did done for you was really evident to us. And I think for this generation, that we're talking about here, who will have grown up, I think at least half their lives would have been since the Conservatives came into power, under austerity, and what will they say politics and democracy has done for them? So I can understand some of that rejection of politics and democracy as actually making as Natasha talked about, making a difference in people's lives that you can see. And this is the first generation, I think, that's not going to be, or is not planning to be richer than their parents. But I think what we need to do about it, and yes, social media is part of it, and I can talk about that. That's the inquiry that one of the inquiries that the committee is looking at. But actually, what we need to do, and I'm saying as a politician, is deliver for young people, and deliver for young people in the next 4 to 5 years. And that means, like the housing, the 1.5 million homes that we're promising to build. That means good jobs. That means growth in the economy and jobs that that young people can, of whatever background and whatever educational attainment, can give them pride in what they're doing. And that means showing that politicians, are accountable, and they're not selling contracts off for PPE to their buddies, and they're not, partying whilst COVID is raging. So if we can do that, I think we can get I hope we can get some confidence back. But just briefly on social...
Can I just point out one quick thing? It also means abolishing things like tuition fees, because saddling young people with enormous amounts of debt is completely
You
have to. We just have to find a way to educate our young at a much cheaper rate, but a lot better quality. There has to be a way. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. But please, sorry, I interrupted you.
You tell that to Rachel Reeves.
Yes, but I think on social media, undoubtedly having 4 or 5 billionaires, wealth inequality has skyrocketed, and the platforms such as X, such as TikTok, which spread misinformation and disinformation, that is also part of it as well. So 3 out of 10 for that.
Well, I'm keen to keep the party politics out of this to a certain extent, because I think we could trade off all evening about what happened under Blair's government. The Iraq War wasn't exactly the most popular thing.
He was quite a strong leader.
And in here lies my example, because the Iraq War was very unpopular with a great number of people. But in here lies my example. Yeah. When people say that they'd rather live under a dictatorship, they make the assumption that their dictator would be agreeing with them.
Yeah.
And what we have at the moment, I've got a lot of young farmer males, especially, who did vote reform, etc., are now saying, we need to get rid of Starmer. He's not going to last. The inheritance tax, blah 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 blah. And I say, he's won an election. He's got a huge majority. The election will be then. No, it needs to stop now. We need to get rid of him. How do you get rid of him now? It needs to be a confidence vote. I said, what, you honestly think 90 Labour MPs are going to cross the floor and cause a general election? As he's got, yeah, but he's terrible for the country. And I say, but you told me you wanted a dictatorship a minute ago. So what happens if that dictator is the exact opposite to your policies? What are you going to do then? Because if you have these conversations with me in those circumstances, you're being shot in the morning. Okay, that's how it works. And I think it comes to this lack of education as to people look at certain things. It's like, I want this, and the only way I'm going to get this is if I don't have to persuade anybody else. And, we are now into 5-party politics, and I think that's good. I think that there is a spread across all wings of politics, from the left to the right, of different flavours of the left and the right, that gives people those options. And if people are saying, I don't like that, I want my strong man to be in place, well, it could be that there's 4 other parties may give you that result, which you don't want. The Conservative Party had a huge result in 2019 on 43% of the vote. 57% of the public didn't vote for them, of those who wanted to vote. You have the same arguments in this election. That is the democracy we are under. That is how it works. And I think that it comes from a certain amount of ignorance as to, well, I really like this dictator and I assume my dictator will be like that. It's wrong. Now, just coming to the second part of the question about social media, You can have a view on social media. I mean, personally, I think it's a cesspit of nastiness, especially when you're in the public eye. It's just really used to sit behind your keyboard and call you every name under the sun. And I'm sure Cheese had this as much as I had, is that you will meet people who have called you things on social media. You know who they are. And when you meet them face to face, how are you doing? It's lovely to see you, Mr. Shelbrooke, blah, blah. It's like, what? You think, I'm not seeing this stuff. But did we, it's got an algorithm. They should be calling
you Sir Alec.
They should be. It gives you an algorithm that brings people together. Wasn't that 50 years ago you chose your newspaper, or even 30 years ago, you chose your newspaper to pander to your politics? If you were on the right, you didn't buy The Guardian. If you're on the left, you didn't buy The Telegraph. You tended... I once heard something that if you really wanted to upset this country, swap the letters pages in The Telegraph and The Guardian and see how quickly it explodes. So I think there's always been a gathering of thinking. I think what social media does is gather everybody together and gives it much bigger numbers.
Ken in Brighton has a solution. He says, rather than dictatorship, what about the Swiss system of regular referendums? Would the Gen Zs be interested in that?
Up until the point they lose what they want.
Exactly.
I mean, if the polling is true that most young people didn't want Brexit, these are the same people who say they want a dictatorship. They're not going to be happy with that result.
They want a dictatorship.
There is a lot to be said. There is a lot to be said for benevolent dictatorship, providing I'm benevolent.
You are.
And on this programme I am, so you've all got to be quiet now, because we're going to go to the news headlines. It's 8:31 on LBC. Here's Daryl Jackson.
The Princess of Wales has embraced Holocaust survivors as she attended official commemorations to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. Kate joined her husband, the Prince of Wales, who described their attendance as a great honour. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have walked back to destroyed homes in northern Gaza after checkpoints were reopened by Israel. The IDF had delayed opening the corridors after accusing Hamas of breaching the ceasefire deal. And a judge has warned some members of a Glasgow child abuse ring may never be released from prison. 2 women and 5 men have been sentenced to between 8 and 20 years for what's been described as extreme violence. LBC weather, cloudy skies across much of the UK tonight, outbreaks of rain and showers and a low of 1 degree.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
8:35 on LBC. On our panel, we have Onwurah, who's Labour MP for Newcastle upon Tyne Central and West, Sir Alec Shelbrooke, don't laugh. It's Conservative MP for Wetherby and Easingwold. That's another new name, isn't it?
It certainly
who on earth has heard of Easingwold?
Well, my constituents.
Yeah, I suppose it would do. Nels Abbey is social commentator. His book is called Think Like a White Man. And Natasha Clark is LBC's political editor. Right, a text question from Christopher in Eastleigh. What will it take for this government to take defence spending seriously? Now, The Times has reported today that the government will not commit to increasing spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030, despite pressure from Donald Trump to do so. Speaking in Parliament today, the Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard, who was on this programme last week, would not say when this level of spending might be achieved, only promising that an announcement will come in the spring. Natasha, what is the problem here? Because we're at 2.32%, I gather, of GDP now.
Right.
I mean, it's not exactly a massive increase to go to 2.5, is it?
It's going to cost, I think, something like £10.1 billion a year, I think, to get to that point. And obviously we know that there's a huge squeeze on the public finances right now, and Rachel Reeves is trying to find the cash for absolutely everything. And yeah, according to those reports in the papers today, and I went to talk to Number 10 today, and no one there was denying that they're going to be able to get to this 2030 timetable like the Conservatives and like Rishi Sunak promised a year ago. They are not committing to that. So it does feel very much, speaking to MPs about this sort of in the last few hours, that it feels like the MOD are losing the battle with the Treasury. And whether that's the case, and obviously we know that they will always play, every single department will play hardball with the Treasury in the run-up to a spending review. It's just how it works. But, whether we will come between the dates of 2027 and 2032 and whether we'll meet somewhere in the middle and maybe that will be 2030, perhaps. But it's all very political. If you're not going to spend it on defence, you're going to have to take it away from another budget. Is that going to be schools? Is that going to be hospitals? We've got this spending review coming up. Every single department is screaming at the Chancellor, and it's going to be some really tough decisions. Now,
I hear that Lord Robertson, former Defence Secretary under Blair, former NATO Secretary General, he's chairing Labour's Defence Review. Now, my gossip, and this is pure gossip, I don't know if you've heard the same.
I think I know what you might be saying.
Is that George Robertson is saying not only should we go to 2.5, we should go further than that. And he's having a massive row with others in the Labour Party who are saying, well, no, we're not doing that. And he's saying, well, I'm doing the Strategic Defence Review. I've got the expertise here, so you need to listen to me on this. Are you hearing something similar?
No, sorry, I was not what I thought you were going to say at all, actually. But yes, and the problem is that, we're talking about getting to 2.5 now, and this is meant to be a Strategic Defence Review that's going to be looking forward for future threats. And people are saying that as soon as it's written, it's going to be time to rewrite the next one. And we need to be looking to go up to 3%. Trump wants us to go to 5%. It is a very, very live conversation, especially within NATO, about going further. I think the NATO deputy chief has called for us to go to 3% already. And, Donald Trump, coming into the White House is going to put this on the top of the agenda for this Labour government.
Do I recall a brief interlude when you were a defence minister?
You do recall that.
Under Liz Truss, I believe.
Yes, and procurement minister at that. And look, I think there's several aspects to this. First of all, I'm putting my NATO Parliamentary Assembly hat on. I have never liked percentages of GDP about defence spending. It is cobblers, quite frankly. And it's something that came about saying, well, in order to get people to a target, we'll say 2% of GDP. Now, Ben Wallace was always clear on this when I was there and when he was Defence Secretary. No point giving me 3% of GDP tomorrow. I can't spend it. Yeah. But I think I asked the Minister today this very specific question. If the Strategic Defence Review comes in with a requirement that costs more than 2.5%, is it going to be funded? Or is he being directed to make sure that it comes in at 2.5%? Now, we have to take our defence seriously. We are talking about £10 billion. Look at the loss of GDP and the cost to the country of Ukraine by not being able to defend its borders. Look what an actual conflict would mean. And by the way, I think there's every possibility that Russia could launch a major attack on this country in this Parliament. That's not missiles I'm talking about. That's
how do we get people to take that seriously then?
Well, by doing this, okay, by scaring people, quite frankly, because I think a war in a distant land, which was the first thing in the First World War, etc., the reality is you cut those undersea cables, our economy collapses overnight. Now, that takes frigates, that takes submarines, that takes destroyers. Now, we are members of NATO. That has the largest going maritime force in history constantly every day. Okay, so we're not sat in this on our own. There's a huge amount of activity taking place. And actually, our investment in the Royal Navy is significant. But I could go up to 5% and I could build you 12 frigates. And, they'll all be tied up in dock because we can't crew them. And this is not a unique problem to the United Kingdom. When I was in the United States in Washington in December, the only one they are able to recruit fully for is the Marine Corps. And it's getting less and less and less of people they are able to recruit for their services. And when they talk about the fact that we've gone down to 2.5%, which is roughly half of the Cold War, America is spending half of what they paid in the Cold War.
They're about 4.5.
Yeah, and they used to be 9 in the Cold War. I mean, these things have all got to be looked in perspective. But does Europe need more spending on defence? Absolutely. Look at the problem we've had throughout NATO in making sure the armaments can get to Ukraine because it went down. But look, let's not overly criticise the governments since the end of the Cold War. Everybody took into this thing that we moved into an era of peace. Did we need to be spending all of this money? Chancellor after Chancellor, government after government said no. Why didn't we build all these weapons? Because the Treasury don't like the idea of tens of billion pounds of weapons sitting in a warehouse that you are never going to use. Okay, so these were sensible decisions in that light. Now, when Ukraine happened, we obviously turned around in government, started spending tens of billions of pounds more. But it is absolutely critical that if the Strategic Defence Review says this is what is needed to defend this country, then that is going to have to be funded. And I'm not interested if it's 2%, 2.5%, 3%, 4%. How are you going to do what is needed to be done?
Essentially, Nels, bang goes your tuition fees.
Well, actually, I was going to say that is essentially... I get it. Lord knows I get it. But to me, that is the argument for tuition fees. That's the argument for how us... Again, maybe I sound like a pacifist or so, maybe I sound a bit naive, but I really cannot... Tonight I'm going to drive home. And when I'm driving home tonight, I'll drive through the West End. And I'm going to see a slew of homeless people on my way home.
Do you not use public transport, Nels?
I try my best not to. Because
can I just pick up on something really important you just said?
You may.
Okay, because you used a very important word, which was pacifist.
Yep.
Now, I don't know any senior military leader, or indeed many military people in this country, who wouldn't have in their mind wanting to have a certain aspect of pacifism. And what NATO is about, it is a deterrent force. And the best way that you can stop a war and stop an invasion is to have that effective counterbalance. When the SNP say they want to get rid of Trident, we're never going to use it. We use it every single day. It is not a nuclear weapon, it is a nuclear deterrent. And deterrents are the most important way to maintain the peace, and that costs money. And I don't deny that there are demands on money in societal issues, but a war will absolutely wipe out all of the things we need.
Again, so people are... Now, you and I are not on opposite sides of an argument here whatsoever. So the security book, if somebody was to invade this country right now, I would tool up as much as everybody else would tool up or so. But the problem I have is that the passion I see within you is no criticism of you whatsoever. I regularly see it, but I don't see it for arguments such as people walk by and drive by homeless people every single day, and I don't see that burning passion to think, how do we get these people in homes? I see young people who are literally in real time thinking that maybe us getting some sort of whatever Colonel Tommy Robinson style figure in Britain or so running the country as a hardman or something like that. Also, and then, of course, and it's a scream out for the fact that this isn't working for them, that the spending isn't going in their direction it should be going into, and we don't have that passionate argument towards it. But I do, Lord knows, I get it. I get the threat. I get the concern. Can I ask you a question?
You say you said you would tool up if we were invaded.
Yeah.
What about if Estonia was invaded?
Honestly, probably not.
No, because about a year ago we did a phone-in on this, saying, well, because there was... do you remember when the head of the army was talking about conscription in a vague way? I remember doing a phone-in, and we had lots of people saying, well, of course, if we were invaded, I would fight for my country, but I'm not fighting for Estonia.
And do you know why we should fight for Estonia and Latvia?
Go ahead.
Because most of our cyber defence in this country is developed and starts in those NATO ally countries. They are very advanced and they're feeding into us. The NATO alliance feeds in different aspects.
And that's why China's tried to cut the cables in the Baltic Sea.
Exactly why they are targeting those countries.
So I agree with with a lot of what Alex was saying. In fact, it was cross-party agreement here. And now you talk about, I think you said something really interesting about, when you talked about driving through the West End past homeless people, and why wasn't there that passion for that, for that. And I am passionate about ensuring that we reduced homeless people. But there's two things on that. The first thing is that the first duty of government is to defend and protect its citizens. Yeah. And that is absolutely it, because, without a home, you have very little chance of succeeding in life. That's certain. But without a country, with a sort of a machine gun at your door, you have no chance. So the first thing is to defend our country. And the second thing is, I wonder how many Ukrainians, drove past homeless people on their streets and thought more spending should go towards them before the Russian invasion.
It's a slightly different situation.
Well, did you see how it happened? People in Ukraine were in coffee shops, drinking cups of coffee and discussing the latest TikTok videos or whatever, and then it was invaded by Russia. Yeah. So I think I want to reassure Christopher in Eastleigh that we absolutely take defence seriously and defence spending seriously because of that. Because I believe that in Ukraine, they are fighting our war in a certain extent. They are fighting to keep us safe here, and that if Putin wins the war, then the future for could be incredibly bleak. So we do absolutely need to ensure that we are well defended.
Okay, the issue is benevolent dictator approaching. We have to go to a break, otherwise we're not going to fit in enough questions. Great conversation, though. Thank you very much indeed. It's 8:46.
This is LBC. Details. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:49. So Alec Shelbrooke, Nels Abbey, Natasha Clark and Onwurah with us answering your questions. Before we go to the next question, it seems that there's a new Chinese AI bot called DeepSeek, which has overtaken ChatGPT to become the most downloaded app in the United States. How important is it that we don't let China win this AI war?
Okay, so Iain, I mean, AI, everyone said AI is a significant different kinds of technologies, and it is going to be everywhere in our lives. In fact, it already is in most of our lives, from Google search to algorithms deciding what you're going to see on social media. So it's important, it's absolutely critical that we are not overtaken, if you like, that we don't, by China, by anybody who is like an ally or a friend. It's critical that we have, and that's why the government's action plan on AI that they launched last week is so important. And obviously there's huge investment in the US. But what this does also mean, and it's kind of like hopeful in a way, is that it is possible to have competition on AI. You don't have to have billions of pounds to invest in large language models and huge arrays of computers in order to do something that is surprising and meaningful in AI. The Chinese did this with, I think, £6 million, which unfortunately, is not much in terms of big research at the moment. And they've been able to take a leap ahead, and so what it says to me is that, we have to invest in AI in this country, and we're doing that, but we also have to be able to have competition. We're going to have a really diverse environment of different applications, different bots, and we should, in the UK, we should be going for leading on AI, because we can do this without necessarily having the big...
So no EU regulation then?
That regulation is... I'm talking about AI, Natasha, but I'm not talking about whether it is in the interest of people. And for that, I'm afraid we do need some regulation.
You need some guardrails, I think was
Let's move on to our next question. Andrew in Fulham wants to know, Rachel Reeves keeps shouting growth, 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 yet the CBI reported today that business confidence is getting worse. How many jobs need to be lost? How far does the economy need to tank? And how many businesses need to go bust before she needs to change strategy or go? It's being so cheerful it keeps you going, Andrew, isn't it? Alec.
Oh, I thought you'd come to me on that one.
Well,
great.
Go. Quite a long time.
Dictator does go around in well, look, let me just say, as a Conservative, that what that budget did was destroy confidence. You can laugh, but all the facts are being presented. You can put your head in the sand.
You were in charge of the economy.
It was growing. It literally was growing. It was growing. Okay, let's take a step back. You are a chemical engineer. I am a mechanical engineer. Electrical engineer. We're both engineers. Yes. We both studied science. Numbers don't lie. Okay, the economy was growing. Now confidence has gone down. You have got separate bodies.
Growing so nobody in my constituency feels that the economy has been growing.
Whereas now they feel like it's milk and honey. So let's come back to that you've got business after business saying that when this NI rise comes in April, that they will suffer, that they are already making cutbacks. I look at the small businesses in my constituency who have already let a member of staff go, who, because of what's gone on with the minimum wage for the youngest people, are actually employing less young people on the Saturday job, etc. Sorry? Fewer. And there is no denying these facts. Now, I think what our little interchange has just shown here is that Rachel Reeves has no intention of changing direction because the Labour Party think everything's great.
Rachel is going around, talking to businesses, putting out the case for investment in this country, and the Pricewaterhouse.
So why have so many of those businesses who signed a letter supporting her before the election now said they really regret it?
Okay, PwC found that the UK was the best place to invest after the US. That is a vote of confidence. We've had 2 interest rate cuts since the Labour government
which has nothing to do with the government. It's the independence of the Bank of England who should have been raising them earlier and cutting them earlier.
Please tell that to Liz Truss, because it was not understanding that tanking the economy would lead to...
So Liz Truss made the Fed interest rates rise, did she?
Liz Truss
made the Fed interest rates rise, did she? Is that what she did? That Rachel Reeves' yield rates being higher than they were under Liz Truss is your definition of success, is it? That Rachel Reeves' yield rates, which are higher than Liz Truss's,
is your definition of success.
The dictator is going to emerge, and he's not being very benevolent. benevolent.
And put up everybody's
Alec.
everybody's
No.
denial about what the government
honestly, I thought we had an uncontrollable panel last Monday. You lot are even worse. Very entertaining, though. Well, let's bring a little bit of sobriety into
Absolutely.
the
I'll be the grown-up in the
Natasha.
room. There we go. Oh, sorry, Natasha.
We can have a much more grown-up conversation.
Don't you start.
After you.
By all means,
No, after
Natasha.
you. After you. No, please. You start.
We're going to put them to shame. After you, Natasha, please.
What we've been talking about, growth.
Yep.
Yes.
Look, I think there is a problem with business and Labour. And I think we will see it in the next couple of months. And I think the budget has not gone down fantastically. It's underselling it to say that. And we do have callers that call into LBC day in, day out that are worried, that were told one thing by Labour in the run-up to the election and believe, rightly or wrongly, that they have been missold what Labour told them that they were going to do. And there are, I think, we see these CBI surveys and other growth measures week in, week out saying the same thing. And I do think there is going to be a crunch point at some point. Rachel Reeves flew quite close to the wind, I think, with her very first budget. She says she doesn't want to come back and do that ever again. But I think this is businesses sort of firing a bit of a warning shot. She's on a sort of last warning already, and we're only a few months into this new government. There are genuine, serious concerns about business. And obviously, Rachel Reeves is going to set out her growth plan on Wednesday, and she's going to be talking about all the things she wants to do to grow the economy. It's something that governments of all colours have suffered with for such a long time. How on earth do you grow GDP? How on earth do you grow the size of the pie? If anybody had a fantastic idea, I feel like somebody at some point in the last 20 years would have done it. And I don't think it's just a problem that Labour have had. The Tories, growth under them was pretty slow as well. So it's a big issue. And if she can come up with some great ideas on Wednesday, I will be all ears.
Yeah.
No.
But agreed. Post 2008, we've been struggling. We've never really properly recovered from 2008 to this very
that's
day.
true.
When you think about it, we're still. I mean, we had artificially low interest rates for an extensive amount of time, which meant that people then borrowed significantly beyond their means to buy houses, amongst other things. So once interest rates shot up or so, you're then seeing the fragility of the economy come screaming outwards towards all of us. At the same time, having very, very high interest rates, a high level of debt, personal household debt within the society right now, and as well as you look at things like graduate employment or so. I know graduates are spending who've been unemployed for over 18 months so far, and they come to me all the time, and we're trying to help them CVs, do whatever they can do. So it's quite a lot. So, but also too, one of the issues I also have too when you're looking at growth is that there isn't what I would describe as a kissing strategy. That there's not enough connectivity. By that I mean this: that when I go down to say my local government, far too often I see the local government making moves that are pretty much destroying business in the area. So you get a place where people are used to coming there, doing their local shopping or so, and parking there or stuff like that.
And they're deliberately doing it.
The local government man just comes along and so they says, okay, we're going to no more parking here, one thing or another, then the business is just closed one by one. And you see it's happening on the high street or so, for example. I often used to make this joke saying that, look, we talk about the death of the high street. I wonder if there will be traffic orders at the funeral of Oxford Street. So you then see this time and time again that the level where there should be joint up thinking that how do we really truly work this? I have friends who own businesses, so the business rates were killing them. A friend of mine owned a business right slap bang in the middle of Dalston Kingsman, or so successful business, but he had to close due to the business rates or so. It just couldn't turn it around. So in terms of how we employ WH Smith or so is now on the market. Don't get me wrong, WH Smith I've long had my
first job, WH Smith, Saturday boy, doing the newspapers, magazine, did it before school throughout the week as well.
Well, when's the last time you bought something there?
Yeah. Oh, well, I go to the airport along with NATO. So I'm often buying newspapers there in the airport.
Well, that's where
you buy anything else, and it's much more expensive.
Actually, I'll tell you what I did do. Now, you're bang on there, because I had to buy some Christmas paper. We would run out, and boy, it was expensive compared to other areas.
You look at some of these food products that they sell, and you think, who's going to buy them at these prices?
UPS.
Anyway, time for our fun question. From Martin in Doncaster. So Lindsay Hoyle had... Oh, it's a caller. Oh, hello, Martin. Yes.
Hello, Ian.
I should have seen. Go on, fire away.
So Lindsay Hoyle has had a cameo role in Emmerdale tonight for his 10,000th episode. Which film or soap would the panel like to have a cameo role in?
Natasha.
My answer is going to be quite boring, just like as a cameo as a cool reporter. breaking some cool story, like Lee Miller, like in the Lee film. That would be my ideal. What was that film about the Wall Street Journal reporter where she uncovered all of the abuse in the Catholic Church? Like something really worthy would be good.
The Globe. The Globe, that's it.
So I'm a big fan of programs like The Wire, The Sopranos, Top Boy, and I would dread to be in any of them whatsoever. So not just that, also because they look like they depict very gritty lives or so. So I think to myself, keeping it really truly true to myself, I think that I would like to be in something that brings the world joy, that makes the world happy, that exposes
Morning
the world. I do the thing with Good Britain everything from time to time again.
We've been on it together.
But I think that Coming to America or so, which is a classic, I think that I would love to play. I don't know, I'd love to play Eddie Murphy's role or something in Coming to America. That would be perfect for me.
Chi.
Well, this is actually a really easy one for me, and because
Baker Grove.
You haven't got the bit. I love the accent, But
That's terrible.
I can get you a drama coach in Newcastle for half price. I remember. I mean, one of the things that got me so interested in just like science and the imagination and different worlds and where you could go. What science and time and all the dimensions and everything. How do you go?
Doctor Who.
Exactly.
Can I change my mind? I prefer that one. We can be in it together.
Which is the doctor, which is the assistant.
And I can be.
Alec.
I mean, narrowing it down to films or soaps, I mean, that's a tough one, isn't it? And I suppose you think, well, what films do you really love? I don't know. I mean, maybe Drive a Police Car or something, is Smokey and the Bandit, if they remake that or something. Child of the 80s, watch Smokey and the Bandit so often the tape wore out. I mean, I suppose you just go back to fun films, which they probably wouldn't make now, to be fair, but...
Carry On films.
Carry On. I think they tried to remake that. It didn't work, did it?
You could play a conservative.
What characters would we... politicians playing Carry On? Or who would play us in the Carry On films?
Ian, what about you?
I don't think we can even go. I would like to play Bobby Ewing in Dallas.
Absolutely.
Even the dream scene.
Well, I could make a comment on that because I sort of felt
I'm too young for
I felt I kind of was in the dream scene last year when I tried to be the MP for Tunbridge Wells, and it failed after 3 days. I describe it as my Bobby Ewing moment. Anyway, Spotlight is the film Natasha mentioned there. Thank you all very much indeed for coming on the programme. Yeah. Tomorrow's panel includes James Starkey, who worked with Dame Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary, the immigration policy analyst and campaigner Zoe Gardner, plus a couple of MPs, Kirsty Blackman from the SNP and Greg Smith from the Conservatives. Coming up in the next hour, we are going to return to Holocaust Memorial Day. Doug Foreman is going to be joining me in the studio. You may remember he was on the programme 18 months ago. Went down an absolute storm, so we're having him back because he is what is known as a Holocaust educator. He's a content creator on social media and co-author of the book Lily's Promise. His great-grandmother, Lily Ebert, survived 4 months at Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1944 and was 100 years old when she passed away in October 2024. So we'll be talking to him about why it's so important that we do learn the lessons of the Holocaust. We'll be taking your calls as well, maybe with some of your reflections on Holocaust Memorial Day. 0345 6060 973. What a rabble, says somebody on the text here.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Prime Minister says it's now a collective endeavour for all of us to defeat the hatred we stand against today. Sir Keir Starmer's attended a service to mark Holocaust Memorial Day in London. It's 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. Holocaust survivor Janine Weber was asked by